A very warm welcome to our first event in the month of August. A special welcome to our past chairs, GB members, committee members, and members at large. Before we start the program, I would like to touch upon some tech etiquette and also quickly inform you about our future events for this month. This event will last approximately 1 hour, and there will be question and answer session at the end of the call. If you have any questions for our speaker, please submit them via the Q&A feature on your Zoom screen, and we will get to them during the Q&A session. Please note that the call is also being recorded for our records. As for the events for this month of August, we have 5 more events. The next one being Women in Family Business Boardrooms and Corporate Governance. It's a workshop conducted by Mr. R. Anand, a Chartered Accountant and Independent Director, and it is on 5th of August. I hope to see you guys there as well. I would now request our chairperson, Ms. Rinku Mechuri, to start the conversation we are all waiting for.
Thank you, Prasanna, and hello, everyone. As you all know, Flow Chennai is celebrating August as the month of patriotism and pride. It promises to be a month of renewing our purpose and flow to empower ourselves and other women around us. We will salute inspiring citizens and learn from their experience through our inspiration series of webinars. Patriotism means different things to different people. To some, it may mean love of the homeland, to others, devotion to their work, or even the freedom to follow their passion. We would love to know what patriotism means to you. Do send us your response by email to flowchennaioffice@gmail.com, and we will be collating this as our member integration event for the month. We launch our month of freedom and victory with an inspiring conversation this evening on lessons in leadership from Kargil. As we all know, July 26th is celebrated as Kargil Vijay Divas. It is with immense pride and gratitude that we at Flow Chennai commemorate Vijay Kargil Divas and salute the soldiers who, with their indomitable courage, drove the enemy away from the inaccessible hills of Kargil and waved our tricolour there again. Our guest speaker for this evening is an officer and a gentleman who was then at the helm of the operations and is here to share his experience with us. I must thank our member, Dr. Renuka David, for introducing us to Lieutenant General Mohinder Puri. Lieutenant General Puri was commissioned into the 5th Battalion of the 3rd Gorkha Rifles in June 1966. An alumnus of the NDA and the IMA, he had held various command and staff appointments in the field and at the Army headquarters. In the Kargil War of 1999, he commanded 8th Mountain Division that spearheaded the Indian counter-offensive against Pakistan, capturing Tololing and Tiger Hill that became household names during the war. These operations were a saga of exceptional bravery, fortitude, and exemplary leadership that makes any Indian's heart fill with pride. He later also commanded a corps in Pakistan sectors and superannuated in April 2006 as the Deputy Chief of the Army Staff. He also has written a book called Kargil, Turning the Tide, that is a first-hand account of the Kargil War and a hard-won victory for India. Lieutenant General Puri will be in conversation with the dear friend Priya Menon, who is an accomplished author herself and a well-known journalist in our city. She wrote Hand of God, a biography of Dr. K.F. Jerian, the celebrated cardiac surgeon. Priya also works as a features editor with a leading daily, and I know that it is her spirit of patriotism that got her to readily agree to host this conversation despite her busy and demanding work schedule. Ladies, without much further ado, let me hand over to Priya Menon and welcome General Puri. Priya, over to you.
Thanks, Rinku, for the introduction. And thank you very much, Flo Chennai, for inviting me to be a part of this session. It's truly a pleasure for me to be here today, especially as somebody who grew up on a naval base and studied in a KV. I think I've been like from childhood witness to the great sacrifices our armed forces make, not just during a time of conflict, but also on a day-to-day basis. And it's a privilege for me to be talking to Lieutenant General Mohinder Puri. Thank you, sir. And I think we will go straight into the questions since Rinku's already like introduced you. So can you give us some background and sequence of events as to what led to the Kargil War?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. And before I answer your question, Priya, I'd like to thank
Yeah.
Mrs. Mitheri and Prasanna for the kind words which you have spoken about me. And it's a great occasion for me to speak to you today, uh, particularly when you're celebrating patriotism and pride as the theme for this month in August. And I've been reading about what Flo has been doing, and I think with a large pan-Indian membership of 8,000 people, ladies, it's definitely a very enterprising organization which is aiming to empower women. And the services definitely are again in the front over here in empowering women. You must have heard about the Supreme Court judgment in which the women are now getting commissioned into the army on a full-term basis. Now, thank you very much. And also, I'd like to thank Dr. Renuka David for having recommended my name to Ringo. Thank you very much. Now, to answer your question, what led to the Kargil War? I'll have to give you a slight background to the events which led to Kargil. 1971, everyone knows what happened. We created Bangladesh, much to the disturbance of Pakistan. In 1984, we went and occupied Siachen when we had definite evidence of Pakistanis trying to intrude into this area and preempt us. However, we occupied it before they could respond or react. Then came 1989 in the valley when the Pakistan-led Islamic movement, should I say, led to the exodus of nearly 400 to 600,000 Kashmiri Pandits from the valley into the rest of the country. So this was a very big uh, setback to the valley. And thereafter, the army was inducted in full force. We managed to stabilize the situation. And in 1996, the elections were held. But this went totally against the plans of Pakistan. And over the years, right from independence onwards, the line of control where this incident took place in the Kargil sector across a frontage of nearly 140 kilometers. Both the sides during the winter months used to vacate the winter posts, that is, posts which come under very heavy or extreme snowfall, so as they were not livable at that stage, and therefore both sides used to withdraw into the rear and come back again and reoccupy these posts once the snow had melted and normal weather had started. Now, after this, what happened? In May 99, there was a there was some indication that Pakistan that there was some movement in the areas across the line of control, and thereafter the Indian Army responded. And by 1st of June, I was given the responsibility of restoring the situation in which the Pakistanis had intruded with their military into these areas. Now, these areas, I was responsible for a place called Mashko Valley and Dras. And the other division was in Kargil and, towards Leh side. But my area of responsibility was restricted to Dras and Mashko, where most of the initial fighting took place. Now, what was the Pakistan aim was basically to internationalize the J&K issue and thereafter bring it to the attention of the world that India is, committing atrocities and human rights violations in the valley. And thereafter, also, sorry, after internationalizing this, they wanted to change the alignment of the line of control by occupying these areas and permanently change the line of control. So they had occupied positions across the line of control, dominating the single highway, single road which comes from Srinagar, comes to Dras, comes to Kargil, and thereafter goes to Leh. Now, movement on this road is very essential for the winters when the build-up for the during the summers for the build-up of the Leh garrison and our troops in the forward area. So it was basically to make sure that we don't use this road and Siachen finally gets isolated. But a quick response, foiled the Pakistanis' attempts to do this. So this was basically what led to the Kargil war.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So, can you narrate some of your own personal experiences, the role you played, and some of the most memorable moments that stand out?
Yeah, this 50-day war is full of memories. And I think in the last 21 years, perhaps every day I've thought of the Kargil war in some form or the other. And there were memorable moments. And where we achieved success was very memorable. And equally disturbing, should I say, was the number of lives we lost. Young
Yeah.
officers and men who we lost on the battlefield. And I think this was something which is always very troublesome to any commander for losing lives under his command. But finally, I think what finally happened was the men displayed a lot of guts, a lot of blood was shed, a lot of glory was brought to their regiments, to the army, and to the country.
Okay. Yes. And so, what are some of the major events that happened which changed the course of the war? There would have been certain things which happened which would have changed the direction, the strategies. So,
Yeah, the war actually started sometimes in the mid of May. That once we had discovered the intrusions, and then the process of decision making and from where to pull out the troops. My division was in the valley, and it had to be pulled out from the counterinsurgency grid and brought into the conventional war across the Zujila Pass. So the major changes, the major events which changed the course of the battle was there was a very dominating feature called tolling. Now, tolling was a feature which was giving us the maximum problem as it was interdicting the line of communication, which I mentioned was running from Srinagar to Leh. With the result, the civil traffic or the military traffic could not operate on this road. And this would have disturbed and offset our ability to stock up the Leh garrison in time for the winters. So this was a very dominating feature, and the capture of this was being defied by the Pakistanis for about 3 weeks. So I came on the scene on the 1st of June, and I then did my own plans and nominated a battalion called the 2nd Rajputana Rifles to capture this feature. Now we took about 12 days, 11, 12 days from the 1st of June to set our own house in order, to build up our logistics, to build up our artillery, to acclimatize the troops since we were going to be operating at heights of 15,000 to 20,000 feet. So they needed advanced acclimatization. So we had to acclimatize these troops. And finally, on the 12th of June, we launched the first attack. And on 13th of June, we managed to capture Tolaling with heavy casualties. But nonetheless, we had got the objective for which we were fighting. And with this, we opened up the highway to a large extent. I think capture of this feature called tolling, which became a household word at that point of time, uh, was the main event which changed the course of the Kargil war, and it turned the tide in our favor, should I say, as far as the consequent events or subsequent events were conducted.
Okay. Okay. And did the government impose any restrictions on you as to how the operation should be conducted?
Government, yes. You see, they laid on a restriction for us,
Mm.
which became sort of a terms of reference that the line of control will not be crossed. Now, this had its implications both for the Army and for the Air Force. First, I'll tell you about the Air Force. The lay of the ground is such that the terrain, the grain of the country is running from south to north. So that means any Air Force, any aircraft which has to engage the targets has to fly from a southerly to a northerly direction. And if they're flying in the northerly direction, then they are bound to cross the line of control. So this was one of the restricting factors as far as the Air Force was concerned. And they
Okay.
had to then engage the targets coming from the west and, from west to east, which was not along the grade of the country. And it was difficult to pick up those targets in the mountains. For us, the problem was, we could not cross the line of control, gain certain advantageous positions across the line of control. And I think that was a very major restriction which was imposed on us. But nevertheless, it was a restriction which we had to honor, and it was a commitment.
Yeah, naturally. So, they always say that necessity is the mother of invention. So, at Kargil, also, were there times when you had to innovate on the spot, whether it's to like make up for shortages or any technical requirements to basically survive and win the war?
Innovation. If you remember the time 1999, we were short of a lot of equipment for the army. Like my division was operating at 6,000 feet, and suddenly we were inducted into 14,000, 18,000 feet. So the
Okay.
type of clothing which was required, that had to be made up in a very fast time. So we did manage with our good procedures and prompt responses from the higher headquarters. We did manage to overcome this big handicap of clothing the soldiers adequately so that they could be launched into the operations properly clad. So the second issue was the use of the Bofort gun. Now, if you recall, the Beaufort was an artillery gun. It had gained a lot of fame during the time when Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister. And during the Kargil War, I must explain to you how an artillery gun, what is the use of an artillery gun? It is a indirect weapon. That means it is firing from a position and it is engaging targets which cannot be seen. So it's an indirect weapon. Distances, I mean, it covers large distances, 38 kilometers, 40 kilometers. So those are not visible to the naked eye. We innovated in using this gun in the direct firing zone. Now, direct firing zone means that you lay the gun right onto the target and you fire. So it goes directly with a lot of explosive content in it and knocks off anything which comes in its way. So this was a battle winning factor as far as our innovation was concerned, and it helped in a very big way. It, in fact, changed the employment of artillery in subsequent years.
Okay.
And another thing, another innovation was, you see, we were short of manpower as far as porters were concerned. So we had to readjust within our own resources to carry the ammunition to great heights, to carry the logistics to great heights, so that people who were going into the attack didn't have to look over their shoulders for any requirement. So these were the major innovations.
Yeah, yeah. So, today, since we are focusing on leadership lessons, what are some of the leadership lessons that you learned during the war, both as a person and as a soldier?
Leadership is, I think, the crunch of any victory is good leadership. And I think it manifested itself right from the company commanders, from the platoon commanders, from the battalion commanders to the brigade commanders. Everyone was on the ball. They knew what their task was. Their spirits were very high. And after the first success which we got, their morale was greatly enhanced to carry on with the tasks which were being entrusted to them subsequently. Now, leadership, see, motivation is very important. Now, when I talk of motivation, I say, how does a soldier respond to a command when he knows that his life is going to be in danger? That by that one word command, that one word, go and attack, he may never come back. He may never come back to see his mother, wife, parents, brother, sister, so on and so forth. But it is that motivation in him that he doesn't want to be called a coward, perhaps. That when he goes back to his village, he doesn't want people to say he's a coward who ran away from the face of the enemy. And so these are some of the aspects which are inbuilt during our training period. We inculcate these qualities of leadership, of motivating these soldiers. It's the job of the commanders to motivate the soldiers. And so these are certain aspects which we use. The second, if you see the tenets of leadership or the principles of leadership for the corporate world, for the civil society, and for the army or for the armed forces is very similar. The principles are the same, but the consequences or the action or the risks involved are tremendous. So when a corporate leader is taking a decision or a risk, he is doing it basically to see the performance of his company. And when I say company, it's more towards the financial profit or loss which he has to weigh. And very rightly so. After all, he's not there for his health's sake. He's there to make money for the company. So that is the type of decision which the risk which he has to take. In our case, the risk might involve the death of people. It might involve the loss of lives. So one has to be very careful when you're deciding to take these sort of risks and what is the human cost to your decision. The morale is a very important aspect in leader, in victory. Morale is a very important aspect. And morale has got two forms. It's spiritual and material. So when I talk of material, it's your, how well you're going to be looked after, how the organization is going to be looking after your family in case you don't go back, whether you're properly equipped as far as your arms and ammunition, etc., your fighting machinery is concerned. These are the materialistic things. If you have them, the wherewithal is available with you, you're quite happy to go into battle. The second is spiritual. Spiritual is you give now in the I think the armed forces is one organization where we don't even look at religion. We look at religion from the men's point of view. Say if it's a Dogra regiment, even if the officers are Sikh or a Christian or a Muslim, he will follow the religion of the Dogras. So that is the basic principle on which we operate. So it's the religion of the men, which is the religion of the officers and the leaders. So I think these are some of the very important aspects. Rest are all the same, your courage, bravery, determination. They are common in all sort of fields of life. But these I thought I would just touch upon to tell you how they influence the outcome of a battle, particularly in very strenuous conditions.
But would you say being part of such an operation has changed you as a person? And if so, how? You say you think about, there's not a day that goes by without thinking of the
Yeah,
war and
it
what
has changed.
happens.
It has
So,
changed.
yeah.
Definitely, it changes you. You see, you have to develop more compassion. You develop more compassion because you see a lot of your colleagues, a lot of people who served with you have lost their lives. So compassion and yes, you look at life in a very different way. You look at it more maturely, perhaps.
Yeah.
And after 21 years, I think a lot has transpired, which has made me hopefully a better person than what I was at that time.
Okay. And I just wanted to ask you now, this is something pertaining to my field profession itself, but what do you think about the media coverage of the event? Was it helpful? Did it help build public awareness and support, or you're critical of it?
Yeah, I'll cover two aspects of this. Firstly is the media, and
Yeah.
secondly is the public support.
Yes.
Now, I think media did a phenomenal work as far as Kargil is concerned. It brought the awareness to the country. It brought the battles every day, whatever developments were taking place, to your bedrooms and to your dining rooms and to your sitting rooms. So the awareness within the country was phenomenal. The second impact of the media was, when the dead bodies of the martyrs went back to the villages or to the places where they were cremated, and the display of those events on TV had a very electrifying effect on the public as such. So the public empathized with the people who were fighting the war. So I think they did a tremendous piece of work, and of course, uh, and it brought what the army is doing in a very transparent way, what the government was doing in a very transparent way to the public. I think these are some of the very plus issues of the media coverage at that point of time. And we had very noted journalists at that time who were conducting the media coverage, who were doing the media coverage at that point of time. Now, as far as the public support is concerned, again through the media, it was tremendous because without public support, I think public support itself is a morale boosting factor for people who are fighting a war. When you know the whole country is behind you, and I think it was one occasion where the people who were in front, they always had the support of their countrymen. And to that extent, the war finished the Kargil operation finished on 26th of July. And Raksha Bandhan, which is well celebrated, it comes sometimes in August, in the early part of August. And, I used to get at least 1,000 Rakhis from all over the country every day. So I'm just giving you an idea of the response.
Yes.
I used to get over 1,000 cards, handwritten, handmade cards by children
Okay.
addressed to me, which I used to disseminate to the soldiers, the Rakhis, and these cards to the units. But this was an excellent cause from villages to big towns and cities. These cards from the children were coming to us. So I think the public support was phenomenal. There is no doubt about it.
That's
And I
wonderful.
think it was again a battle winning factor.
Okay, okay. You mean to say by boosting the morale of the soldiers?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, okay. And looking back, do you think there's anything that could have been done better at Kargil,
Yeah, done better. There's always scope
or
to do.
done different? Let me put it that
Yeah,
way.
every war you can't. The next war you have to fight in a different way. You can't fight the next war of what you fought 20 years back. So,
Sure.
if I introspect, yes, some things could have been done better. Maybe if I had lesser casualties, if I had more firepower, if I could have reduced the type of casualties in both the divisions. We had 527 killed. So you can imagine the number, and they were all young soldiers, young officers who lost their lives in performing their duty. So I think it's something phenomenal, and the bravery which was displayed by the young officers and men is phenomenal. I think this country needs to be proud of the type of the armed forces which they have. And no country has fought a war at 18,000 to 20,000 feet and won the war. So I think this by itself is something unique as far as the Indian armed forces are concerned. So, these are certain aspects which are unmatched by any
Yes.
army in the world. And I say it with a lot of confidence and with the authority which is at my command.
Yeah.
Definitely, having gone through this and having read a lot about military history and military warfare, I can say that no army has fought a war at such great heights in such inhospitable terrain, in such
Yes.
adverse weather, and with such in such trying conditions as what was done in Kargil during 99.
So, is this what prompted you to write your book, to share your experience and insight
I'll tell you,
with the world?
there was a lot of pressure, more the domestic pressure from my wife and my daughter, and of course from my friends who said, that you must record something, your whatever happened, a first-hand account. And since there are a lot of books written on Kargil, and I might not agree with all of them, but I think coming under my pen, it is more authentic because I was a part of the war. I was conducting the war in that particular area of operation. So it is my first-hand experience. I've also, in my book, given what went wrong, what didn't go wrong, and how things could have been done, how things can be done better. So these are some of the aspects I think which made me write the book, and I'm glad I wrote it. It's being well accepted in the army circles.
Yeah, sure. And one final question before we take questions from the audience. Now we've just celebrated the 21st Kargil Vijay Divas, and so 21 years later, where do you think India stands in terms of preparedness against an attack from Pakistan?
Yeah, I think 21 years has changed a lot as far as the country or the armed forces are concerned. The type of weaponry which was fielded at that time is far more progressive and modern than what it was. We may be having slippages here and there, but these are aspects which any modern army is bound to have, and any nation which is a developing nation. After all, you can't budget the whole amount to the armed forces. There's various other fields which have to be looked after, and but I think we are modernized in a considerable to a considerable degree, and the process is ongoing. It's not that the things have come to a stalemate or a stand down. With Pakistan, we are very well, we are very well off as far as Pakistan is concerned, and I think we've called their bluff a number of times, and they are always in denial, and they will always remain in denial. So I think Pakistan is something which we are not too worried about. It's China, which the present situation which is taking place there is something which
Yes,
needs more attention than Pakistan.
yes.
And I'm sure the government and the Indian armed forces, the present people who are responsible for the security of the country, are looking into this as they should be.
Yes, yes. So we'll take questions from the audience now. So, you, what are your views on what has been happening with China in Leh? You've just,
Yeah, I just
touched
told
upon.
Yeah.
you that
Yeah,
China
you've just
is
touched.
a point of concern, definitely it's a
Yeah,
point of concern. And after the announcement of the pandemic, if you see, China is uh, sort of resorting to these type of action, not only against India. They've done it against the Vietnamese boats in the South China Sea. They've done it against the Indonesian fishermen. They've done it against the Japanese in Senkaku Islands. In the South China Sea, they are trying to show their domination. They changed the complexion of Hong Kong. They are, threatening Taiwan in their own way. So China is trying to open up a lot of avenues and a lot of places where they can create these sort of pinpricks. I think we are very confident, I think, as a country and as an armed force, we are very confident that we would be able to stand up to the aggression or to whatever actions the Chinese are taking. And we don't have to worry on that account. I think the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force are well placed to,
Yeah.
to ensure that the security of this country is well looked after.
Okay, yeah, that's another question on China. They're asking, do you think there is a war on the horizon with China?
But that's very difficult to say whether
Yeah.
the horizon. I wish I
Yeah.
was a soothsayer. Perhaps I would have been able to give a better answer. But
Yeah,
no country is wanting war today.
sure.
War is not the answer, particularly when the whole world is looking at development and
Okay.
enhancing improving the economy. War is not certainly the answer to this. And but one thing is for sure that if there is a war, the Indian armed forces will give them a run for the money. Definitely.
Okay, so coming back to Kargil, one of the questions is about, do you think anything could have been done to reduce the number of casualties at Kargil?
I told you that is one of the most painful thoughts which always goes into a commander's mind. With the terms of reference which I mentioned, which people in uniform would perhaps understand, of crossing the line of control.
Hmm.
That itself was a restriction which could have reduced a number of casualties as far as we're concerned. But then one understands what were the political compulsions at that point of time. And in today when I look back at those events, I think I have a better understanding as to why we laid down this terms of reference to ensure that the war is kept localized and only restricted to the Kargil sector and does not explode into the other areas. If you remember, we just in February 99, in May 99, 98, we had exploded the nuclear device, and both the sides were declared nuclear states. So it was very necessary to control the fallout of the war and keep it restricted within, limited space. Oh, definitely. I think casualties is something which could have been reduced to a large
Yeah.
extent, but it's, in the heat of the battle, it's very difficult to. It's only later on that you say that I could have done this, maybe it would have reduced. If I had attacked from here, perhaps this would have happened. But at that point of time, I think that was the best which we could have done.
Okay, so another person wants to know, lots of messages praising the army
Yeah.
and stuff. So then, how are the veterans taken care of once they retire from the army? And there is another question which can be combined with it, where the person asks whether anything is done to address the mental health of the soldiers once they return.
Sorry, done for the soldiers.
Yeah, for the
After,
soldiers once they return from war, what is be done for them, especially with regard to mental health.
with regard to
Mental health.
mental health. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, mental health, mental trauma, I think is more a westernized form of, these ailments. Our men are very sturdy, so they don't suffer from any trauma, post-war traumatic experiences and all. I think they're quite sturdy. And yes, of course, some people do get into these sort of mood swings and all. But then the camaraderie in the units itself
Yeah.
ensures that we have a buddy system. So it
Okay.
ensures that whatever a soldier is going through, his buddy, his immediate organization takes care of him and looks after him and makes sure that emotionally there is stability as far as his life and his family life is concerned. So I think that is very relevant, and we don't have the type of trauma which the Western armies have coming back from overseas and landing back in their own countries. I think ours is a more hardy, mentally more tougher stock of people.
Okay, okay. And once war veterans retire, are they, what? How are they taken care of by the army? Is there any?
The war veterans are, I think, everyone, whether it's a war veteran or whether he's a veteran. I
Hmm.
think the organization does look after us in a very good way. Of course,
Okay.
in keeping with the economic state of the country, and but as an organization, I must say that the services themselves take a great deal of interest in ensuring that people who have retired are well looked after. Their basic requirements are met, like their pension, their pay and allowances, their normal wherewithal. Some issues which they were enjoying, like canteen facilities, etc., which they were enjoying while in service continues. So I think the organizational support is there for all ranks. It is not only at the higher level and all. There's no exception made. And I think the organization itself looks after the retired people in a very, very good.
Okay. And another person wants to know, why did we not use Air Force in Kargil? Any particular reason?
Air Force.
Yeah.
No, I told you, Air Force, we
Yeah,
didn't
that's what
use,
I was thinking.
yeah,
You said
we
this
didn't
is
use the
this.
Air Force. It had certain restrictions in its
Yeah,
employment, but we
restriction.
used it extensively.
Yeah.
And this, in fact, was again a morale raising factor for us, and also a degradation of morale for the Pakistan Army because they couldn't use their Air Force.
Yeah.
We used the Air Force on our side of the line of control, and
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't use their Air Force. So I think it greatly helped the ground forces to a large extent.
Okay. And yet another question is about what's your opinion of about the participation of women in the military?
Yeah, women, that's a very interesting question. Since I'm talking to Flo, I think it's a very important. And when I mentioned empowering women, the services take the lead in this. Um, till the Supreme Court judgment, which women were sort of employed in the army for 14 years, and now they can serve for their entire duration. Terms of condition have changed. They were in the non-combat roles. Okay, non-combat roles. That means they were not in the armored corps or in the infantry or in the artillery. If you're familiar with the organization of the army, they were there in the rest of the supporting roles. And I think they were doing an extremely good piece of work, and they will continue to do a good piece of work. There is now a military police regiment which is being raised, I think, or all women regiments. I'm not up to date as to what is the progress in that raising and whether it's been raised or not, but this is very much on the cards.
Okay, because a lot of questions here is about the role of women in the armed forces. Will they be employed more in in the core of it, the heart of it, or in the administrative side? A lot of
Presently,
questions.
they are in non-combat. They are in
Gone.
the non-combat roles. That is, um, even in semi-combat roles, like the engineers, corps of engineers, they are employed in that. They are
Okay.
recruited in that. In signals, they are there, for communication.
Mm-hmm.
Then they are there in the service corps, in the logistic units. They are in the
Okay.
legal side, in the education side. So there are a lot of
Okay.
opportunities for women in the army.
Okay. Okay. And someone wants to know whether any children of martyrs have joined the armed forces.
Oh, a lot of them. I must give you an example. I'm glad you asked me this question. It reminds me, I mentioned to you the turning point, the tide which turned in our favor was the Battle of Tololing.
Mm.
Now, in Tololing, there was last night. Last night, if you're I'll give you the equivalent of what happened in the Western Army. This is Lance Corporal, that one striker. He lost his life in Kargil. And he had two sons. And he was determined to, while he was alive, he had told his wife that I want him to join the army. And so his wife, despite all these problems, despite all the hurdles, single-handed mother, not fully educated, she gave the best education to her sons. And today, one of the sons is an officer in the regiment of his father.
Oh, okay.
So that is the type of I'm giving you, and there are many youngsters who have joined the army, children of martyrs who joined the army. So it's, I think it's a matter of pride for them also, as it is for us.
Okay, so I think the next one somebody has asked is a little bit of a trick question. I don't know. It says, of the three sections, divisions of the armed forces, which according to you is the strongest?
Sorry?
The three sections of armed forces, I think what they mean is like Navy, Air Force, I mean,
Yeah,
so there
Air
are
Force,
three.
Army, Navy.
Yeah, Air Force, Army, Navy. Which is the strongest according to you?
So I'll be very neutral. And as
That's why I said this seems like a trick question.
yeah, that's why, I think it's all three are equally important. All have their place in their own specific tasks. And I think all are essential for the security of the country.
Yes, yes. So yet another question. Who do you think is the bigger enemy in warlike situations? The enemy right in front of you, or the one that is within, attacking your morale, media, public, politics? You know what is like the bigger?
I think for a developing country, for a young country, we are only 70, all 75 years old. I mean, you're not an old country. So
Yeah.
we are still evolving. The media is evolving. We are evolving as a society. So I think the enemy in front will always remain of paramount importance. The rest of the country, once an incident takes place, you've seen what is happening in Ladakh. Again, when the problem was there, when we lost 20 soldiers, the type of response which was coming from the entire country.
Yeah.
So the media can, does know where to uh, show the emphasis and where to draw the sensationalism. And I think, but for the services, or for the country, the one in front will always be the enemy.
Okay. So a couple of people want to know whether you recommend the use of robotics.
Robotics is something which will gradually come in. It's not a scientific innovation which will straight away. Robotics can't be used right at the forward line. For any success in battle, boots on ground are required. Robotics can be used in various other forms, definitely, and we are using them in some form or the other, but it's still a developing experiment as far as our country is concerned and our armed forces are concerned.
Okay, okay. And there is somebody who wants to know why we are not equipping our soldiers with better equipment and warmer clothes in anticipation of war and extreme weather. It happened in the Indochina War of 60s. Even in Kargil, they say that was an issue.
I think this again is a misinformation perhaps, which is,
Yeah.
with some channels of the media do uh, bring this out.
Okay.
From my own information, the army is fairly well equipped. The logistics, as you know, are well looked after, and people's basic requirements of their clothing and etc. for extreme high altitudes are adequately met. We spend a lot of money, and the revenue expenditure all goes into this sort of a thing, looking after people.
Okay. Okay, so I think we come to the last question, which says, what happened after the war, and the universal slogan "Ye Dil Mange More," which came after the victory. Do we have any more such slogans that we are not aware of?
No, neither am I, but we'll have to wait for another war to get knowledge.
I hope not. That, you
And I hope we
know.
don't get any more slogans.
Yes, exactly. We'd rather do without
Yeah,
slogans
we'll
and
find
without
our
a
own.
war.
Yeah, let's freeze it at that, I think.
Yes, yes, I know. Let's we can stop the discussion on that very positive note of looking forward to a future without war.
Yeah, I think.
And yeah, so over to you, Rinku. Thank
Thank you.
you very much, sir. It's
Thank
been a
you.
very lively, very informative session. So thank you very much for
Thank you,
that.
dear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, Priya. Thank you, Lieutenant General Puri. It's really been it's been more like a conversation. I think the participation from our members has also been amazing.
Thank you
I
very
think
much.
somewhere
Thank you.
being in the South, people tend to get a little, cut away from the North. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that we could have you here.
I realized that when I came for Colonel David's Radiant Meet,
Yeah.
the seminar, the conclave that time. Yes,
Okay.
I'm
I
glad.
now
There's
like-
one. Sorry.
Sure. Carry on, Priya.
Yeah, no, there was one last question which has come in case he wants to answer,
Yeah.
which says, does the Indian Army keep in touch with seniors such as yourself for advice if they feel the need?
Well, if they want to, but I think it's best left to the young people who are on whose watch the security lies. It's best that they handle it. In case advice is required, I'm sure in this country there's always free advice for everyone. There's never dearth of free advice.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I'd now like to hand over to Jayashree to deliver the vote of thanks, please.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant General Mohinder Puri. Though this is something that happened over 20 years ago, it has certainly left a lasting impression on all of us. It was a proud moment when we saw the picture of the national flag flying after the war was over. We humbly bow down to all the Jawans and officers who lost their lives so that we could feel safe again in our homeland. Most of what we know is based on what we read or heard in the news or hearsay, but it's a whole different feeling to hear about it from someone who was part of it all. So, sir, to listen to you narrating the stories behind the stories behind your battle scars was inspiring. And it was actually much more than leadership. It was brilliance, bravery, selfless service, patriotism, and strategy. The right questions bring out the best answers. So I sincerely thank Priya Menon for actively engaging with Lieutenant General Mohinder Puri. The way you posed your questions, it brought out the behind the scenes version of this legendary war. So thank you once again for
Thank
sharing
you
your
very much.
story with us.
Thank you.
I don't think any of us will forget this session.
Thank you.
Thank you all, past presidents, past chairpersons, and GB members among us for being part of this virtual meeting. Thank you all members for your participation, and I look forward to